Then on this one over here, let's see. I think I'll stop the share. That's easier to see the recording option. There it is. And we've got City of Ann Arbor in. Hi, Aaron. All right.
Morning.
Oh, and Diane. Okay. Yeah, there's more popcorn to pop here apparently. See, people are used to it starting 5 minutes late, I think, than you recapture those 5 minutes. All right, I think that's good enough. I can start. So I'm Roger Rayle. I'm chair of CARD and chair of Star Residents for Safe Water. And I'm going to share my screen to bring up the agenda. Share. Boom. And if you want to see everybody if you're on in the mode up in the upper right corner, you can change your view, and I recommend gallery view side by side. And then you have a bar between the shared screen and what's being shared, and you can show more or fewer people or the whole screen full of people. So when I record, I try to adjust the screen uh, when I remember it, so that you can kind of follow what's going on when you look at the video later. And that's what we do. We record this and we put it up on YouTube right after the meeting. And there's a transcript that automatically gets created, so we can use that to quickly find things. And when you're viewing it later, of course, you can watch it at whatever speed you want to watch it. And you can follow along with the transcript so that you can get through a meeting faster if you miss a meeting, if you want to go back and revisit the meeting. So everything that we record everything, and there's been a couple times where we've actually turned off the audio, but that's a real hassle to do or to edit it out later. So speak accordingly. Um, and at this point, I will turn it over to Beth, our secretary, so she can do the minutes for the May meeting. And I'll bring up the May meeting right now.
Thank you, Roger. And if there's anybody on here that would like to be added to the email list, you can private message me in the chat, or if you received this via my email, you can just email me. I see a couple names I don't recognize. That's why I'm mentioning it. Um, and we are going to now approve the May meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve that?
Moved.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. If there's anyone opposed, speak up where I can hear you. Hearing nobody, the minutes are approved. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Jack Eaton now, the executive director, who will moderate the meeting. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Beth. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Beth. I'm Jack Eaton. I'm going to try to lead us through the agenda this morning. I'd like to start out by welcoming our new Water Resources Commissioner, Gretchen Driscoll. We appreciate you attending, and at any point in time that you want to add to the conversation, just click the little button for raising your hand. Is there anyone here from the EPA that would like to add to our discussion today? There are people I don't recognize. That's why I'm asking. All right. Seeing no hands, I'm going to ask Georgia to update us from Congresswoman Dingell's office.
Yep, good morning, everyone. Apologies if it's a little loud in the background. I figured it was a nice enough day that I can open my window. Um, yeah, I just wanted to provide more of a local update for folks. In mid-June, the Congressman has a week where Congress is not in session, and for that reason, we are hosting two town halls. And we would welcome your participation at it if you are able to join. The first one will be on Monday, June 16th at 6 p.m. That one will be in Dexter. And the second is Wednesday, June 18th at 6 p.m. That one will be in Belleville. I will send the link to the materials that we have. The one that will be in Washtenaw County, we're fortunate that almost all of the state legislators in Washtenaw County will also be able to join us. So that is great. It will be a good forum. Of course, we're hearing about almost every issue under the sun, though, including plenty of EPA topics that I think would be relevant to this group. So I'll share some of that information in the chat so that you have it, but we would love to see you there if you are available. And yeah, from our perspective, we're just preparing for that time when the congressman is home in our local office, and we'd love to see you. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to move along. I don't believe Dingell's here, so we're going to turn this over to Chris for the EGLE update at this time.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. So just wanted to touch base about a couple of points that EGLE's been working on. The first sort of relates to location, or agenda item B on this agenda here, the Slauson School. So for those of you that may be unaware, they are planning to install a geothermal well field at that school. I think their plan was for this summer. So the health department kind of asked for our assistance in getting some constraints down there. Long story short, we've asked them to put in some test borings where they do some vertical aquifer sampling. The concern is that we do have a sense that there is shallow, low levels of dioxane there. And what we'd like to prevent is any unnecessary cross-contamination of the lower aquifer. So we've asked them to, like I said, we've got some test borings. We know there's aquifer and then an aquiclude, so like a shale or a clay material that would prevent flow through that, and then a lower aquifer beneath that. We've asked the consultant, Midwest Geothermal, to do some vertical aquifer sampling there to get a sense of what dioxane is in the area. And then, if it is present, we've asked them to double case the wells through that shallow area, and that would serve to prevent any, groundwater communication between the upper and the lower aquifer. We've had really good luck with that. They've been really cooperative, really understanding. We've had some back and forth, and it sounds like that work is pretty much ready to go. And so this kind of has a couple of benefits for the Gelman project. Number one, we've been seeing the dioxane in the Allen Creek there, but we don't know exactly where it's entering the creek. Certainly, it looks like it is local, right? Like very close to there where it's entering. But this would provide some constraints on exactly where that's happening. And then the other benefit is that there was some discussion, we didn't necessarily ask them for this, but they had discussed potentially putting in a permanent monitoring well there in the course of doing that shallow aquifer sampling. And, as I'm sure you're all aware, there's some discussion as to what's down there and reticence on Gelman's part to put in such a well. So if we did have that well, that would provide us some constraints on at least the shallow groundwater and what's going on down there with the dioxane. So, positive things there. We think that, we're in a good place with the geothermal drillers. We're going to get that data and review it, and hopefully, they'll take all the precautions that we've asked for to protect that lower aquifer in the event that the upper aquifer is contaminated, which, like I said, we're pretty sure that it is. So that is that. Were there any questions about that?
Chris,
Yes, sir.
how deep are they going to go for the geothermal?
Uh, I believe that they are going down 800 feet is the planned depth. That shallow aquifer is only, their test borings found a clay layer at about 70 feet, and that coincides, that agrees really well with our Rockworks model that showed a similar confining unit there at about that depth. So yeah, that's the 70 feet is about how deep they're going for this test boring. The glacial aquifer there, we think, is about 2 to 250 feet thick, and then the remainder of the boring will be in the cold water shale.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Chris. Can I make a comment?
Vince, go ahead.
So I appreciate your giving us a heads up on this and giving us information. Unfortunately, we've asked for shallow groundwater tests in West Park and have not gotten any success with that, even though we've had 85 or 50, close to 50 part per billion in West Park. And the concern we have in the area is that the west side has a lot of wet basements. There's a lot of very close to the surface water features. And I think, our group, has published an article in an international journal showing that 1,4-dioxane in groundwater into a basement would evaporate and could expose the homeowners. And there's a real concern, I think, that could be happening if we were at 50 part per billion in West Park like 2 years ago. It has come down a little bit, but the number they were talking about in this article is 150 part per billion as being a concerned value. The authors also have had thoughts of probably could be 100 part per billion as well. More data canal analysis would give us more information regarding that. So unfortunately, we're not getting much help from the city or the county or the state on whether we're being exposed in West Park area or any other place in Ann Arbor. And so I think it's not a minimal position we're at. This could be troublesome to homeowners and the city. So I'm just putting that out there again, and would hope that we would move into that direction. Dan Bicknell had laid out a great analysis of a good system to do those near surface tests. And we have, presented that, and that has not been accepted either. So, yeah, I think the geothermal, I just wanted to make one comment on that. In some places, there's real concerns about using geothermal where you may have contamination, that you could be inadvertently exposing whatever to the contaminant. So that's the concern I have, that really are careful about, not
Certainly
exacerbating the situation. I think probably, a system that would be sufficient, but I would actually think they could use a different method for heating and cooling, with a good heat pump system. Would be cheaper and more effective. So thanks for your comment today. I appreciate it.
Certainly. Absolutely. And Vince, I just want to mention, we are aware of those concerns with the basement intrusion. And, this is part of collecting some of that data will give us better constraints on, what really is what are the concentrations down in that area that we, need to look at. And if they are approaching that, certainly we'd be having discussions about that and what that means for going forward. So, we are aware of that concern. Rita, I see you got your hand up too.
Yes, very quickly. Of course, the concern is there, and it sounds like you're on top of it, at least to look at the possibility for contaminating the deeper aquifer. But also, I just want to, say there is good news here. The good news is that we're going to be collecting more data, And I don't know what role EGLE had in that, but it's certainly welcome. So thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, we advocated for as much as we could. Certainly we're not really in a position to demand anything, and we
Yeah.
just are really appreciative that, the consultants, the people that for the city and the school district that are working on it were receptive and willing to help us. So yeah, we're just really grateful that we could get that cooperation. Indeed.
Thank you.
I think Beth, you had your hand up next.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. And I know you're the expert on this, but can't then all that water activity of geothermal pull the contamination from Vets Park closer, or you know what I mean? Like,
That,
and those layers are only so they're not foolproof that it won't
sure.
cross-contaminate. And
That is true. You're not wrong about that. Certainly that is something that we considered. We just want to make sure that we're getting, the constraints. And it sounds like, I guess, Beth, to your point, you asked like that the contamination can move around due to those activities, right? That's why we are asking for that characterization, in the first place. And then if we do find it there, we're asking them to, as part of, and this is through the health department, because the health department is the one that will be issuing the permit for that drilling. And if we do find dioxane in that shallow aquifer, they will be doing what's called double casing those wells, at least to that clay layer. And that should prevent any of the groundwater that's in the upper aquifer from communicating with the lower aquifer and preventing that cross-contamination.
Thank you. Follow-up question. Would there then never be a chance that lower aquifer will get the higher concentrations from the higher contaminations?
Not through that pathway, right? It wouldn't be from cross-contamination.
Right.
However, that said, we don't know, there could be dioxane in that lower aquifer that can come down in the future. So,
right.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Will they continue to monitor that over the years then? What's coming up from the lower aquifer? And if all of a sudden we find that it's 1,000 parts per billion, like it's pulling, I mean, I don't know. I'm just foreseeing.
Certainly. I think we have some pretty good constraints that lower aquifer isn't too badly impacted. Gelman put in a couple of new wells in the last year or so, just to the west of this area as part of a settlement with the city. And those are so far non-detect. So I think that's a good sense that, the lower aquifer, at least to this point, has not been impacted. That's not to say it never could be, but we just want to prevent that from happening from cross communication with that upper aquifer. Yep, of course. And Glenn?
I think you said this is a geothermal system.
That's right.
So they'll pump the water up, extract the heat. Then how do they discharge the water? Where does it go? And could that impact the exacerbate contamination?
That's a great question. So what you've described is called like an open loop geothermal system, but these are a closed loop geothermal system. So my understanding is that in each borehole, there's basically like an up and a down pipe with a U at the very bottom. And then that water gets circulated, right? And I guess, depending on whether you're heating or cooling, right, you take the warmth out and send the cold water back down, or vice versa. And, these systems aren't foolproof, but ostensibly, between the grouting and the tubing that goes down, it should all be relatively contained. But that's a whole other concern that is a little bit kind of outside of our purview. So we just want to make sure they're not, moving the contamination around unnecessarily at this point.
So the water gets pumped out and then pumped back down to the same look where they withdrew it.
My understanding is that this system does not use any of the groundwater. It's basically just a self-contained, and I think it's some sort of like glycol. Think of it like almost like an antifreeze, like your car's radiator that gets circulated around. So
into the ground?
Yes, sir. Yep. Well, I mean, within the pipes in the ground. Jenny's got her hand up, so it sounds like she's ready to step in and maybe correct some of anything that I've said wrong.
Yeah, so with the closed loop system, they put in, it's like usually 1.25 inch, what they call U-bend. So it's tubing that, as Chris explained, there's a down and an up, and there's a U that connects them at the bottom, why they call it U-bend. They put that all the way to the bottom of the boring, and then they grout all the way around it, all the way back up to the surface. They'd never put a pump in there and don't extract the groundwater. And then they take a glycol and potable water mixture from the surface, like from the building, and they put that in the tube. So that's why it's a closed loop system, and that gets circulated through the heat pump. But it's not groundwater, and the groundwater isn't extracted. So our main concern here is only during the point of drilling that we don't cross-contaminate aquifers. But we're not extracting water, so we're not going to like have a source pulling groundwater in from nearby, and they won't be extracting or discharging that groundwater, if that makes sense later.
So you're they'll be pumping the glycol solution down into the ground through
the tubing.
Through the tubing, through the loop, yeah.
Yep.
So Roger had his hand up. He can't raise the hand in the program because he's the host. But go ahead, Roger. You're mute. Roger, you're mute.
We can't hear you. We still can't hear you, Roger.
You think I'd know how to do this? So it's like your refrigerator. It circulates the coolant around and it cools, using the whatever it can use to cool it. Now, of course, your refrigerator sometimes might spring a leak. And so this is why they grout it carefully, and they won't spring a leak. I guess if they see that they're not, if they need to add the glycol solution, then they say, oops, I got a leak. And then what do you do? Of course, that's another issue. But is there a report on this? Because I don't think CARD has received anything about this.
It's been mostly just us interacting with the health department. It's not like we received like a submission. This has mostly been, the health department asked us for support, and we're doing the best we can to, provide that support within the boundaries of our.
It seems like that would be a good thing to share with CARD so we can be more prepared when this comes up, and we can, have our comments all ready to go.
Certainly. Yeah.
So can you do that? And can you not wait for it to be posted on RIDE, because it takes a long time sometimes, but, share when something like that comes in, just share it with me or with Beth or with the CARD email.
Yeah, I think we can certainly commit to that.
And thanks again for this. And I'm going James, I think, has his hand up.
I see that.
After that.
Just a quick question, and either for Chris or for Roger, if you could put the maps up. Where is the upper and lower aquifer? Just to have it clear in my mind. What are we looking at here?
Well, on the ground. So Roger, I don't know if you want to zoom in there on where the Slauson School is. So where, imagine in your mind that you have a slice down through the earth, right? So in the upper, and then you pull that slice up and you're looking at a cross section. So in the upper 70 feet, we know we have aquifer material, right? It's sandy, gravelly. Then through those test borings, and our model also shows we have a clay layer from 70 to, I can't remember what the bottom depth of that is, but it was relatively thick. So 70 feet of aquifer, then a clay layer, and then there's another aquifer below that down to essentially the base of the glacial aquifer at about 200 feet deep.
Okay.
This might be the closest cross section right here.
Okay, I just want to have it clear in my own mind what we were talking about here. So thank you.
Certainly.
One more question, and maybe this is for Jenny. Would any homeowner be able to do this, or would they have to go through this much also anywhere above the plume?
It's a good question.
So they have to go through us to get a permit. Now, if we have had one go in over the plume, and they did have to containerize all of the spoils from their drilling of their borings, but a typical residential system will only go like 150 to 200 feet deep, and they might only have like 3 to 5 borings depending on how big the system is. This is a very large plan, but we did have one go in on Valley Drive near like over high levels of the plume, and they were required to take precautions, and it ended up being much more expensive, unfortunately.
What was the address on that?
It was near Valley Drive. I don't know the address off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Way back up here. Wow.
James, you still have your hand up.
I also see a hand from Bob, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm making sure that James, there we go.
There we
Go
go.
ahead, Bob.
Okay, if I understood you correctly, Chris, you were saying that only if you detect dioxane in the aquifers as you drill will you be packing it with the extra caulk, I guess you call it, or sealant. Is it possible, if that's correct, is it possible to just do it anyway, even if you don't detect the dioxane at this moment, because it's moving? So
So
that's my question.
that's a great question. And, I guess basically the drilling is the important part to have that double casing because that's when it will serve as a conduit. Once it's grouted in place, once the well is complete, we don't expect that it should serve as a conduit to communicate. So that's why we're asking them to do that double casing in this instance if there is dioxane to basically protect from that. But
But
once
not
it's
if
set,
it isn't.
that's correct. Yeah. And if it isn't there, then it's not really a problem because once they grout it, that will not be a conduit and there's no likelihood of that cross contamination, if that
Okay,
makes sense.
thank you.
Yes, sir. Of course. Great. These are great questions. Really appreciate them. I can tell it's generated a lot of interest and, I will say this isn't really like my wheelhouse. I'm doing my best to get up to speed and provide good recommendations to the health department. So we're kind of all learning here, and I really appreciate the feedback so that, for the next time I know what questions to ask as well. So, and Vince, I see you got a hand up again.
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate that I think people should look at the heat pumps. They've gotten very efficient. I think what I've read is that heat pumps are way more efficient and cost less cost than doing geothermal. So just thought I'd pass that out.
But unfortunately, that would be a comment that probably the school district would need to consider in the schools. So, Roger, I see you got another hand up.
Well, I just wanted to hear again, how deep is this recirculation going to be? I thought I heard 800 feet, but I think I must have misheard that.
No, sir, that's correct.
That's correct, 800 feet?
That's right.
So they're going to go below bedrock.
Yes, sir. The wells will be completed in the bedrock. In fact, they're deep enough that, I don't know what the thickness of the cold water shale is in this area. They may contact new geologic units, that lie beneath the shale. So yes, it is very deep.
Yeah, and that's really important that we don't, and everybody assumes that there's an extensive shale layer that's thick enough to keep any contamination from what we consider shallow, intermediate, and deep aquifers from getting even farther down to very deep potential aquifers, which I don't think there's no bedrock aquifers being tapped in this area for water like there is in the UP.
No.
But who knows, then someday in the future, there may be some need to tap that water. And we certainly don't want it to get some dioxin in there because there won't be any bacteria or things necessary to break down the dioxin. Dioxin would be a forever chemical once it gets that deep.
Yeah, I certainly don't, I can't say what is in the geology between, the base of the shale where we have some constraints right now. I guess I should say the top of the shale, at about 200 feet depth and what's below that. But I think that at that point, I don't believe that even if there were water in some of those bedrock units, it may be like fossil water brines that isn't even worth trying to use as a groundwater source for drinking. So I think keeping the glacial aquifer, the lower part uncontaminated, certainly it's still in the prohibition zone, right? So can't really use that water anyway for a beneficial reuse at this point. But we want to make sure that if there is that possibility in the future, that we're doing everything to protect that resource now with what we have in hand.
Well, that brings up another point that something that Gelman did in the Evergreen area with the DuPont Circle contamination. They tested to see how old the water was. And it was older than the shallower water,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't pre-glacial. In other words, I mean, it wasn't it had some radioactive like from the atmospheric testing back in the 50s
Mm-hmm.
showed up a little bit there. So we knew it was somewhat new water.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, when they go below bedrock, that might be a good thing to test, to throw a test in for how old the water is when they get to it.
I'm inclined to agree with you. In a perfect world, I feel like we're already asking them a great deal, and they're already being extremely cooperative with, what we're doing. So, we can certainly float that and see what they say. But
Well, I think Gelman should pay for that.
that would be awesome. Would love that. Uh, but
And they apparently know how to do it.
okay,
I think we have to recall that we can't force Gelman to do anything
yes.
beyond what the consent judgment requires them. And so the importance of this particular well is that this is an additional well on the east end of the plume um, that's going to add to the data that we have available to us as to how quickly the plume is migrating towards the river. So I see this as a plus, and I really appreciate EGLE um, being proactive on this particular point. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Jack. I
Very
just had a couple
quickly,
other things briefly. Oh, I'm sorry. I see you got your hand up, Rita.
oh, just very quickly. I think it's important for everyone to notice, if I heard you right, that they're putting in a permanent shallow monitoring well. Is that right?
They had mentioned that they were considering it. We said,
Oh,
we can't
please.
tell you that we have to, but we'd really love it if you did. It would be so cool. So I think that's the plan. I haven't
Yeah,
heard anything to the contrary yet. And like Jack and Rita, like you said, like that's,
that's
we
the
got to
first
take,
one.
that's right. We got to take these small incremental things,
Yeah,
when we can get them and where we can,
yes,
to operate outside of, what is written in the CJ. So,
yes.
I appreciate that you guys see it the same way because I see this as like
Yeah,
a big step in the right direction.
yeah,
So
thank you. Yeah.
certainly, certainly. Vince, did you have anything else you wanted to add before I
I
move on?
just, yeah, I would like people to look at the map that Roger has on the screen. The green section is artesianing or very close to the surface water level. So
Yeah.
if you look at that, you can see at least this closed area, probably more so than it shows on the full map.
Mhm.
Those are communities there that have water very close to the surface, if not artesianing off the ground. So that gives you an idea of contaminated water in the groundwater like that could be really significant. And I think, unfortunately, I don't think the city takes it seriously enough, or to some extent, the county, that people should be aware that this could be a real exposure issue. Rita and Bob Bailey put a lot of effort into an article that indicates that you could have issues with water coming in your basement contaminated with 1,4-dioxane. So thanks much.
Yeah, I'll just add that those outlines here of this light green area are from Gelman's own maps from 2006 and 2007, where groundwater is within 10 or 20 feet of the
Mhm.
surface. So it
Mhm.
could potentially get to people's basements. And it is little dots of it that go back up where the Allen Creek is, that if I take away the overlay map here, you'll see that there's some um, bubbles that extend back up quite a ways,
Mhm.
past where the school is and stuff. So yeah, we already have contamination in the deepest aquifer in this area. So if they don't find dioxin, I'll be very surprised.
I agree with you, Roger. We're pretty confident that it'll be there, and that's why we want to, take these steps to minimize any cross contamination. So,
Yeah. Anyway, Chris, thanks for the update. I'm going to go back
of
to
course.
the agenda here so that we
Okay.
can continue on.
Sure. Yeah. So my next item is not really on the agenda. I did just want to announce that EGLE's Drinking Water and Environmental Lab has notified me that we are now able to report out 1,4-dioxane at 0.2 parts per billion using our current analytical method. So they've been doing a lot of work, and they got the EPA sort of certified that reporting limit. So, now we are reporting dioxane down very close to what is capable with method 522. And we're reporting below the EPA screening level for dioxane. So, even if we can't necessarily enforce it, at least our testing will inform homeowners, and then they can, make decisions, what they're going to do about that. And that reporting limit will be applied to the residential samples that we'll be collecting with the health department's help next week.
That's very good because that gets pretty close to the 0.12 that Scioto Township and Ann Arbor Township and the city have been using. Well, the city, I think, doesn't get down with 0.12, but so from 0.5 to 0.2 is quite a good. That's better. We get a better heads up when we hit a hit there on those. Thanks for that.
Yes, and yes, we were really happy to be able to bring that information to you. And we're really glad that our lab is working hard to make those numbers better and get that information out to the public. So
good news.
Yes, indeed. And then my last item, I just wanted to mention, we did respond to Gelman's municipal water connection contingency plan. That happened on May 20th was the date of the document. And we basically said, this needs more information. I don't know if you looked at it and did your own analysis of it, but we thought it was a little bit short on information. Long and short, we asked for them to gather the permit documentation and have all the permits needed in one place and ready to go, to get some more engineering information about the connections. Let's see, there were a couple other items. I think those were sort of the big ones, though, for that. But yeah, we want them to put a little more effort into that because, it's our position that that document should very much enhance a quick response if there is a threat to a private drinking water source. And we didn't feel that document met that criteria, the one that we reviewed. So we've asked for some changes to that.
And that's these areas here that I pointed out last month in Scioto Township. And I'll have something to say about that in my chair update too.
Okay. But yeah, I think that's really all I have for right now. That's kind of where EGLE's been at. Really appreciate the venue here to discuss those things. Thanks for all the really good comments.
Well, Chris, we really appreciate the information you bring to us. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We should move on now. I'm going to call on Kathy Knoll because she has other obligations today and she needs to get out of here before 11. So,
Jack, can I just add one thing?
Sure.
Back to since no one from EPA was here to talk about the NPL, I just wanted to give a unsatisfying update. We did reach out to Region 5 last week, and the decision, there's still no decision. It's still with headquarters, and we do not have an anticipated date for a decision on NPL listing. I mean, it's not a no, it's just still on hold.
Okay. So do you get the impression that that they're letting a lot of staff go at Region 5 or
what I've heard is they offered another early out, take a bonus and leave, and so I think there are several people that are taking advantage of that.
Always the good news. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, quickly, Joshua, by headquarters, do you mean Region 5 or do you mean DC?
DC. DC is making the decision. Region 5 is waiting they met with DC, but they're still waiting to hear.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thanks for the clarity.
Yep.
Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Okay. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, I enclosed the MPART PowerPoint for the presentation that they did to Scioto Township back in April. So you can view that. And as I stated previously, we had a new discovered PFAS contamination on Dino Drive in SIO, and that's what's the focus of the presentation. In addition to the currently existing PFAS site out at Huron River Drive and Zebro, the old Chrysler area. I have one other issue, but I don't have all of the information on it yet. And I see Jenny's here, so I'm going to go out and talk to Jenny probably later today about it. There has been a request from Mark Smith and those dealing with the MIHQ site over on the Gelman, close to the Gelman property, to change the fire suppression system and the mechanism in the building. Apparently, the current fire suppression system in that building uses water from a tank. And I have incomplete information on this. I just learned about it a few days ago. So they want to hook up to the source in a water well on the Gelman property. And someone talked to our utilities director, and he just talked to me, and I told them, wait a minute, we got to get more information here, because I know some of the wells there are heavily contaminated and that dioxane can be aerosolized. And if there is any contamination in this well that they're proposing using, it's not appropriate, I don't think, but we need more information. So there's a person at EGLE working on this. It's Bert Steinman. He was on the email that I received, and that's all I know. So this is a request that we just received.
So Kathy, can you send me that email?
Yes, I'll forward it to you.
And I'll have that, because I have some better knowledge of how their suppression, their water, their sprinkler system.
What is your
I think
knowledge
you're talking about
of their current one?
Yeah, I think you're talking about building one here. Because MAHQ has two buildings, building one and building two. It's the old Gelman building one and building two. And building one, and probably maybe building two, used to get their fire suppression from the water tower.
That's it. That's
the water tower's gone.
Source. Wait a minute. There was another, but there was.
Yeah, right here. This is a water tank now.
Yes.
Of course, it doesn't have as much pressure because it's not as tall as the water tower.
Okay.
And I remember during the brief time that Gelman was very cooperative with the pre-CARD group, even pre-SRSW group, that I met with then President Kim Davis. And it was right after Gelman had a fire in Chuck Gelman's office. And he was showing me the damage, and you look around the edge of the room and you could see a watermark about 4 inches from the floor because of rust. It was from the well water that was in the water tower. So yeah, they probably should change that. And now it turns out there's a well. There's a and I don't have it brought up here on the map, but it's near the tank. There's a well here someplace that they did not plug. They plugged the supply wells in the front of the building and the back of the building, and they had another one someplace. And some of those had double and triple digit parts per billion in the early days that they're using for process water. And it was deep. This is in the E aquifer, which they said wasn't contaminated later. Um, so yeah, the firewall they call it, that's up in this area someplace, is probably what they're talking about, and that one has been a non-detect the last time that was sampled, but they're not. If they're sampling it regularly, we're not getting all of the samples that are uh, done there. I don't know
How
if
how
the
long
EGLE
ago?
has any more information about that, but yeah, go ahead.
How long ago was it sampled?
Um, and let me see. I could bring it up here and see. Let's see if I bring all the wells up. I'll have to get back to you because I don't want
Okay.
to take time worth of
Okay.
meeting for that.
That's fine.
It was within the last 15 years.
Kathy,
Yes.
even though there's no prohibition zone because it's Scioto Township, it's not Ann Arbor,
Correct.
there
Correct.
should be a prohibition zone over this property. I mean, it's the highest concentrations. I don't think they should use any wells. I mean, my just first thought is that that sounds crazy to me, but
Anybody from EGLE have any comments on this?
I'm not going to say anything at this time. I'd certainly, I'd like to get more information and think more about the matter before I offered a lot of comment.
Were you aware of this?
Negative.
No, this is the first we're hearing of this.
Okay. Okay.
What was the date on that email that you got, Kathy?
I'm gonna
Was it recent?
have to look here. I've had multiple emails, just a minute. Late last week. So I
Okay.
will find
That's
some of them and
real
forward
recent
them
then, yeah. Okay.
to you.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing. It's sad that pops up just before the card meeting, not this might impact whether we're going to have a July 1st card meeting.
Oh, I missed that discussion. Oh, okay. I'll search here and start sending a few emails to you, Roger.
Yeah, thank you.
So what do these facilities on the old Gelman property use for their source of drinking water? Are they connected to city water?
They're on city water.
Okay.
They have been since that
I-
whole area got hooked up to city water.
I'm
Then
sorry.
city sewer, you know.
Okay, Kathy, do you have anything else?
No, nothing else. Thank you.
All righty. Thanks for your input. That was important. We're going to go back to the
Jack, I
Yeah.
had one statement I'd like to make about that. One of those things on Dingell Drive is Roven Ceramics, where they make clay for use with the school systems and individual artists for doing ceramics. And Roger sent me a message saying, well, once it's fired, it would be okay, but it's not the firing process, it's the hand building with the clay that may have PFAS in the construction of the clay.
Good point.
That's again back at Dino Drive.
Yeah.
The PFAS issue there.
James, you have your hand up?
Yeah, very quickly for Kathy, and I realize this is not germane in terms of our scope of the organization. But you mentioned that there was PFAS contamination at the old Chrysler facility at Zeeben here on River Drive. Did I hear you say that correctly?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
That's been there for a long time. There's regular monitoring going on at that site from MPART.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. Good to know. I appreciate that.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead, Josh. You're mute.
Yeah, unmute yourself, Josh.
Good idea.
Happens to the best of us.
If you look at our ride mapper, which has all our institution controls and restrictions on it, you can see the ordinance area, but you can also see the Gelman property. I I didn't realize this, but it's kind of funky. Most of the old Gelman property is restricted for wells, except the area where that fire suppression well is, and the tank, and the lagoons, and the current remediation building. So kind of weird.
Wait, would you say it's all restricted except for the firewall?
From what I can tell, yeah. Like building 1 and building 2 that you're talking about is restricted, but the Gelman remediation building, the lagoon area, the fighter remediation area, the tank area, that is all does not have a restriction at this point.
Yeah, because they know there's going to be dioxin and other things moving around. Yeah. And you should be aware that the firewall and the water tower, SIO had an arrangement before the water lines were extended that Gelman would provide the fire department tankers with water. So if there was any fires that used tankers with water from the Gelman site during those early days, it could have had dioxin in it if the testing wasn't fully, fully done. Not that it matters because, the fire probably gets rid of a lot of it, but just so people know that there was that arrangement because that was the only, SIO didn't have its own water tower at the time. Anyway, that's just an aside.
Yeah. So Jim, did we address the school sourcing of clay to your satisfaction? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not exactly.
Okay. So have you contacted the school district about this?
I have not.
Okay.
I taught in Ann Arbor schools but I retired like 15 years ago. So I'm just concerned that the use of the clay by kids in their hands, I don't know what effect that would have. And that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. So maybe SIO Township's contacts with the state regarding the pollution in that area in general, they could bring it up with the state to
From what I know about PFAS is mostly a danger when ingested. It doesn't pass through on broken skin as easily as dioxin.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct from our knowledge. It's the ingestion that's a concern.
So as long as they're not licking their hands with clay on it and stuff, we should be.
Sometimes
you
that
happens. Other
happens.
things that you would get from the
sometimes
clay.
that does happen.
You'd have to lick a lot for
Yeah.
80, 100 years for it to be a concern.
I'd be worried more about lead and things like that in the clay.
Correct. That's probably a bigger concern.
Yeah, anyways, that's something you can follow up on, Jim, and let us know.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm going to turn my attention to Washtenaw County.
Jack, this is Mike Moran. Before we just leave this issue, the tanker agreement that SIO Township has, do you know how old that is and whether Ann Arbor Township is aware of it? Because we're usually part of any tanker relay up there because of the facilities that we have to assist in that way.
Well, I don't have any formal reports of when that was done and when it might have been discontinued. I've heard people talking about it a lot and back in the early days. So that'd be something to research.
Okay, thanks. Because it sounded like an old discussion and it wasn't anything I was aware of. Not that I would be necessarily on this, but I'll try to check into this.
Well, it's certainly not in place now because the water tower's gone.
Okay, I get it.
Roger,
So
this is
there's no substitute relay situation?
Good thing.
Okay, I think it sounds best that I talk to our fire department and ask them to talk to Scio's fire department and
That
figure
sounds
it
like a
out.
plan, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And Kathy,
This is
you were going to interject something
I
there?
was. This is the first I've heard about a tanker agreement. I wasn't even aware that it had existed in the past.
I'm sure it predates your involvement with SIO.
I think so. Okay, I'm going to sign off here soon.
All
Yeah,
right.
you have a meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Now I'm going to try to move on. um, Jenny, do you have anything to report from the county?
I can give an update for the health department. So as Chris mentioned, we are doing our annual residential well sampling next week. So we have 127 homes that we're targeting, although one thus far has declined. I would expect a few more to come in, roll in, if they're anything like the previous years. We included a survey this year on that. So if you are in our sampling area or know anyone who is or got that letter, if you please encourage you and your neighbors to take that, that would be appreciated. I wanted to add that there was some news articles that came out in the state of Illinois last week regarding they have a dioxane contamination plume serving a mobile home park, and the state has encouraged those residents to install either activated carbon or reverse osmosis systems. So we reached out to be like, hey, what do you know that we don't know as far as like certifications? And unfortunately, there is nothing new yet. So even though they recommended those items to the residents, there's still no NSF certification or no like dioxane approved specific media available at the residential level, unfortunately. So we have one home here in our sampling area that has all the treatments. So they have activated carbon, they have reverse osmosis. So I don't know if it will come to fruition, but Chris was going to reach out to them and see if we couldn't use them as like a test study, realizing all the systems have different media, they have different cartridges, but try to get an idea, are we seeing anything different, if it goes through those different media?
Yeah,
Just
before and
cursory.
after the test, before and after the filtering, that would be a good thing to test.
Yep. So we'll see if that resident is open to being a science experiment for us. And then I just wanted to add on the geothermal stuff. Washtenaw County issues permits for those systems because it's part of our local regulation. However, at the state level, the geothermals, the closed loop geothermals are not regulated. If you're not extracting groundwater, they have like best practices, but they don't enforce anything. So while Washtenaw County is a little bit unique, and I think maybe Marquette County does something too, most of the jurisdictions in Michigan don't. So if you are concerned about these things that are going in, not just here, but everywhere in contamination zones and really deep and being drilled by drillers that don't need to be a licensed well driller, we have those concerns. And if you want to speak up to your representatives and try to encourage the state to maybe take up some level of regulation around those, I think it would be a good idea. Yeah, Roger.
Thanks, Jenny, for bringing up that Minnesota news story. I got it in one of my Google news feeds and bookmarked it. I get these feeds, so I have about 1,100 stories like that in the last few years of dioxane sites around the country. And the thing that was interesting to me on that is that they, as you said, wanted the people to go out and do their own testing. And they didn't say how much that was going to cost. They didn't say whether they have testing at the state. They didn't say what level testing, but it turns out Minnesota now has a tighter standard for drinking water. It's what did it say in the story? It was 1 part per billion, but if it got down to 0.7, 0.8, something like that, then that was going to be a level of concern. And of course, Michigan is still at 7.2, is one of the highest ones. I almost put this in my chair update today, but I knew we weren't going to have time to get through it all, but we don't know where that dioxane near that model home park came from. There didn't seem to be any factories right nearby. There's a railroad next to it, but yeah, there's a lot more unknown about that. We'll have some follow-up on that, obviously, in the future as one of the sites to watch.
You're right. When I talked to what I saw was in Illinois, they were using Eurofins was one of the primary labs that was offering the analysis with 522. We reached out to them to see if they would take them from individuals. We're still waiting to hear back, but it's great news that the state is revised their reporting limit to go to 0.2. So I don't know that we would, how sought after that would be now if the state can get to 0.2 versus 0.12.
That's right.
But if we can find it, we'll still have it available. And then I know Brighton Analytical has indicated while they don't have it available yet, they are working towards getting approved for that method also.
Okay, good.
Any other comments or questions?
What were we talking about with Gretchen? Does she have an item here?
She doesn't.
I don't have an update. I just am on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have an update. I'm just on, obviously, thank you for the welcome, Jack. My understanding is because EGLE is taking care of that we're just, involved, but not actively involved at the level that I think you guys would like us to be. So just monitoring the situation here. So I don't have a report.
Yeah, but every once in a while there's something that changes. So we probably should keep this on the agenda.
That's fine.
As a point, at least on a quarterly basis, and you can send in something if there's anything changing. And
yeah,
because everything is, people are very aware of surface water, and you're a surface water person.
Right.
Drains are surface water, basically. But the water doesn't care.
Right.
Water will go underground and come back up. And if it's got dioxide in it, it affects all of us. So that's why we want to include you.
Yeah, and I was listening to that Allen Creek Slauson conversation very closely. We're also monitoring that because our drain's there. So
yeah.
So
I mean, what happens with you and the rest of the CAR group is kind of what happens with them inside EGLE. The RRD people are not the people that do some of the groundwater and, surface water. There's different departments. And once in a while we have other departments of EGLE involved at meetings, but it's kind of infrequent. And it's important to get information from all sources when it comes to water, because water doesn't care. Water is going to go where the water wants to go.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Do you have a question for me?
Oh, not necessarily, aside from welcome and thank you for joining us and coming into the loop on this. We deeply appreciate it. I did have a question, maybe not necessarily to your office, but feel free to chime in. But I was just going to double back in terms of what was happening in terms of the MS4 violation at West Park. Can someone enlighten me on that in terms of either the state, locally, or?
That's what she was talking about, that she doesn't have any update on that.
Okay.
It's in EGLE's hands mostly at this point.
Because I know we didn't directly discuss it. Okay, thank you.
Oh, I do have one thing for Jenny that I see here, number 4. The Realtor meeting on the presentation. I was at that meeting. Is that presentation shared someplace, Jenny?
It's not. I did get a request for that, so I'll send it to you at the same time.
Yeah, because I think that has some really good information in it that people need to know.
Can I ask a question about the Allen Creek drain, since it was just brought up? The next time that EGLE does their the surface water collection and sampling, could you do the output of the Allen Creek drain into the river, the Huron River there?
Beth, I mean, I'm not going to say we couldn't. I know it's a little bit more challenging to get down there. I'll also say that as part of the approved monitoring plan that we have with Gelman, they are sampling that outfall quarterly.
And
Yes.
is it negative always, non-detect?
They have detected dioxane there. I haven't looked recently. My recollection is like 3 to 4 parts per billion was the most recent number there. So
Yeah. Thank you.
yes.
Okay. Anything else under Washtenaw County heading here? I'm going to move on to Ann Arbor Township. Are there any reports from Ann Arbor Township?
Nothing from us.
All right. Well, is there anyone here from the city of Ann Arbor? Patty? Aaron?
Aaron's here too.
Yeah, I'm here. Is Patty here?
There you are.
No major updates. Just that it's a busy construction season as always, and there's typically just extra work if it's construction in an area with shallow groundwater that we know is within the Plume footprint. So there's a lot of just working internally with various project managers on, what to do with that discharge or what to do with that dewatering discharge. But other than that, no major updates.
Yeah, and we should all appreciate how much trouble it is for Ann Arbor to do any construction with football season, the festival, art fair. You got like maybe 3 or 4 weeks to do all the construction.
So
yeah, I think I think they have wrapped up a bunch of projects already, which is very early. So they were able to get out earlier this year. So that's great. Good.
So using the Slauson as project as an example, could the city ask developers or project managers to test if they're digging deep enough into the plume area that they might encounter dioxin?
That's certainly something we could do for our own projects, for capital projects, and we do that. Yes.
And you have done that. the Eaton wells. When Matt Knob is involved, he got Eaton to do sampling for that Eaton project, the old development.
Interesting. Yeah.
James, you have a question?
Just a comment, really, and Aaron might appreciate this. Just to bring everybody up to speed, after our last meeting, did review the comprehensive land use plan that was discussed at last month's meeting, and that is hearings and a review of the document is under the Planning Commission right now. And we noted that there was no language related to the plume included in the document. And we had sent a formal communication, and I communicated it directly on behalf of the executive committee to the Planning Commission last month, that some reference be included with the document. I spoke briefly with the city planner, Brett Leonard, and he was interested in seeing data related to it. But I referred to him, of course, to Aaron's department's website, and it did include a current map of the plume in our communication. But just as in terms of the plan starting to come together, there should be some sort of reference to the plume, and that if development should occur, some consideration could be made of potential development that occurs related to obviously bigger projects. You deal with the issue of vapor intrusion and other issues, and there's certainly some large sites in the west side of town that are going to come directly with the plume. So that is happening.
Thank you. Maybe Beth wants to add an item under City of Ann Arbor about the comprehensive plan, so we can continue to monitor that issue.
There.
Jennifer?
I just wanted to add that for, similar to what Slauson, we, the county, do when we issue the permits, require some sampling. So we did it on Catherine Street. There was a building that went in last year, the year before, and there was history of shallow volatiles, so we had them sample not only for volatiles but for dioxane, even though they were outside of the dioxane area. So just, I guess, heads up, the health department does look at some of that and require it.
Okay, we appreciate that. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I did just want to mention that when we in conversations with the EPA regarding the NPL listing, in addition to the considerations regarding drinking water exposure for dioxane, we did mention the extra burden it places on public and private resources for development
Yeah,
as a concern that they should consider. So
thank you. That's good to know. Any other comments or questions under the heading of City of Ann Arbor?
No, in regards to the comp plan, I would say there's a project website that folks can visit, and then also keeping track of the Planning Commission meetings. You can check out their agendas and minutes. They're reviewing staff and public comments right now, and then there'll be a second draft coming either later this month or July timeframe.
Thank you. As I recall, you mentioned in a previous meeting that staff was working on a report on the capacity of our utilities to handle the planned increase in population. Was that released?
We are working on a couple. So we're working on the stormwater comprehensive plan and also our wastewater infrastructure comp plan, and neither of those are available yet. I want to say that there is today at the Planning Commission, I think systems planning is giving kind of an overall presentation of kind of what infrastructure changes would need to happen to address the proposed growth or the anticipated growth. I don't know like the scope of that presentation, but I believe that's happening today. But neither the stormwater or the wastewater comp plans are ready yet.
Okay. Thanks so much. Go ahead, Vin. You're mute.
Sorry about that. Thanks. I just wanted to ask Aaron, what's the rationale for the city of Ann Arbor not taking steps to test water in West Park area or nearby homes that or school for that matter, to try and keep a track of where the 1,4-dioxane is going and where it might potentially be an issue for exposure. Thanks.
Sure. Well, we are tracking that information. So we did do some wet basement testing in 2020 where we found non-detect in a couple of those homes. We know that the concentrations are largely below 7.2 in the areas that we know the shallow groundwater is. We aren't ignoring it. We are tracking it, and we are looking forward to the further conversations that EGLE is having with Gelman about the monitoring plan in that area. I know EGLE has expressed concerns about some data gaps in that area, and I know they're actively working on that, and that's something that we are also tracking.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further hands here, I'm going to move on to the executive board. Rita, do we have any update from Yale? Do they still exist?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I apologize. I meant to reach out to Basilis because I haven't heard from him in a long time. However, regarding item 4 under the executive board, he was interviewed by Eleanor and she's got some quotes from him. So I think that their money is a mess right now with the current administration, and because there's no external advisory board meeting scheduled, which is my role in that center besides just an interested citizen. So I guess I don't really have any. I'll try to find out something for our next meeting, definitely.
Thank you. I don't know that we actually have a subcommittee on the Allen Creek MS4 permit, do we?
Yeah, we're on it, but we haven't done anything.
I see my name there, and I haven't attended a meeting yet, so.
Well, hold the space. There might be.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Alrighty. Moving right along.
July 1?
Yeah, do we want to talk about the July 1st meeting?
Well,
Yeah.
I was thinking we should cancel it, but then there's so much content today that popped up. I'm worried about canceling it because then we have to wait till August to get updates on some of this stuff. So I'll just put that out there and let other people weigh in.
I don't think we should. I think we should continue to have the meeting. I think there's some developments that happening along those issues. I think of a couple more that I've heard of that I can't talk about right now, but I think I'd like to see discussed at the July meeting.
I wouldn't mind holding the meeting if it turns out to be a short meeting that doesn't hurt my feelings. So why don't we just keep it on the calendar? And,
Yeah, I mean, if some of these things are hot topics, we need to move those up on the agenda and let people skim through if there's no updates otherwise.
I second Jack's opinion. If we let's try to keep it compact, maybe more than our usual meeting, and then because it is the first week of July, and I suspect that some people may be joining the meeting from vacations, etc.
Right.
So does anybody have a strong opinion on the opposite view? I want to hear everybody before I cut this off. Okay, we don't need to take a vote on this because we're not canceling it. So Rita already mentioned that Eleanor has some good articles on the Docs and Plume page. And those are worth checking out. So
is there a link on the agenda? I couldn't.
Right there.
There. Okay, great. Okay, so that takes you to the Michigan Public Radio webpage and the articles. There's 3 articles and 1 broadcast audio. Personally, I think the articles are really outstanding. The audio, it's more of a story of Eleanor being interviewed about how she went about writing the story. She did it as an intern, but I would say the professionalism is really great.
Yeah, the reporter's notebook is really interesting.
Yeah, that's very good too. That's right. So there's actually, now there's actually 4 articles because the reporter's notebook was also added. So they're really good. CARD is very prominently featured, along with some really nice quotes from Chris from EGLE. I think I've especially noted that there was a healthy respect, I think, for trade all around, and many different voices. Eleanor did a really good job, in my opinion, of telling the story. It's organized. I think many journalists would be tempted to organize it chronologically, but Eleanor, the 3 articles and 4, if you include a notebook, are very thematic. So the first article on May 27th is told from the homeowner's point of view. What happened to these people when they came home and found out that they had hundreds of parts per billion of 1,4-dioxane in their drinking water, and no one knows how long they've been drinking it and how it impacted them. And then the second was the article is one that features health effects and with fair, I don't, with a lot of our quotes, like I was quoted and Bacillus was quoted in discussing how the lack of information about 1,4-dioxane health effects, including the fact that there's never been a study of human health effects from drinking water. There's not a single study about that. So, and then the third one gets into some of the politics and legalities and some of the issues of the court consent judgment, and has features a lot of Roger is strongly featured in that one, and Dan Bicknell. So she just organized it really well. They're very easy to read, and I just thought they were good. So I don't think I saw Eleanor on the
I'm a
call.
little disappointed she didn't come to this meeting so we could give her the proper dues, you know.
I know I did scan looking for her name, but I did send her a thank you email because I've been interviewed in various means for different media, and I just thought she did a really good job presenting different voices and opinions and perspectives and choice of quotes, and I was
Yeah,
just really pleased.
considering she's, you know, it's been a short period of time for her to get up to speed on this and to
Mhm.
be able to cover as much as she were. Now, there's a lot of details, of course, she didn't know about and didn't get into, but that's there for somebody else to build on.
I think she told me she had a conflict today. That's why I put Rita down to
Oh,
talk about it.
Ah,
Thank you,
okay.
Rita.
okay. Well, I'm happy to say I think they were great. And I think, I told her anything she could do to help promote sharing of knowledge and information about this contamination is
Yeah.
what we at CARD would really welcome and appreciate. So I think she did that. It's good.
Great articles, yeah. Thanks, Eleanor.
Alrighty, I'm going to turn this over now to the chair for his update. Oh, unless there's other issues from the executive board. No, go ahead, Roger.
All right. Let's see. I have to go back to my. This will be pretty quick. I start off with acknowledging the same thing that Rita just talked about, this series of articles by Eleanor. And let's hope that that kind of reporting continues every few years where we can bring people up to date and keep this problem is not going to go away anytime soon. So it's good to have it in front of people on a periodic basis who otherwise wouldn't keep up with it. I'm going to go back to last month's slide because it occurred to me that maybe people didn't realize where this information came from. Gelman did a study of how much dioxin was in the aquifers back in 1989. And in the marsh area, it was 1,818 pounds of dioxin. And then I went on to talk about uh, how much left is left now, and there's 700 or some pounds left now, at least, based on this original estimate and how much they've removed. But this came from a more complete study, of course, of the whole thing. So what they call the bog is the marsh area. And so that was the 1,700. And then, but the total down here at the bottom that's almost cut off is 64,000 pounds. And that was a way low estimate because just from the period of 2000 till May or March of this year, they removed 78,000 pounds of dioxin. So they removed more dioxin than they said was down there in 1989. You know what I think I need to do? I think this is cutting off some extra stuff. Anyway, so there's some years before that, and if we go look at the timeline that I put up on SRSW, before 2000, they removed 18,000 pounds by just pumping and dumping it into the deep well, into the mile deep injection well, untreated. And that's Gelman's own estimate how much they removed in that period of time from 87 to 94. And then they removed 2,300 pounds in the core treatment discharge from 97 to 2000. And then, so if you add all those up back as of 2018, they removed 112,000 pounds of dioxin of the 850,000 pounds of dioxin that they used over those 20 years from 66 to 86. So I just wanted to keep people aware of the amount of dioxin that might be left down there. We don't know how much is left. We don't know how much is left in each area. And in particular, if I go back to the portion of dioxin that's outside EGLE's study area for their rockwork study. So this rectangle is where the rockwork study covered, and it does not include most of the several dozen township wells that have dioxin in it. Now those levels are low. Sometimes they're below 1 part per billion, but some are up to 2 parts per billion. Now in Minnesota, they would be getting a notice saying, "Hey, you should get a survey. You should get a sample and get some filters added to your water." Michigan, because they have 7.2 parts per billion, it's not quite there yet. If it gets 3, then maybe have to do something. Well, 3 was the old cleanup standard before it went to 77 and 85 and then yada yada. Um, so how much dioxin did it take to contaminate all these wells? 1 part per billion? 1 pound? 2 pounds? 5 pounds? Gelman used to periodically calculate how much dioxin is left in the aquifer based on their samplers. They quit doing that because they were always underestimating. But somebody should be, to get an idea of how little dioxin it takes to contaminate this many wells, would be a good piece of information. Back to the next item. Any questions so far on that issue with pounds of dioxin left and where? Maybe Chris, maybe you guys at EGLE have thought about this, and how do you calculate how much dioxin's in the aquifer? I know Gelman had a big spreadsheet of, they made a grid and they say, well, this aquifer is this deep and the concentration of that means there's this much dioxin in that little that volume, and then they added all that up, and that's how they came up to 64,000 pounds and later on 80,000 pounds. Does Rockworks have anything built in that you could do that with?
So Roger, we do have, it can tell us like the volume of groundwater that, let's say, is, like between 5 and 6,000 parts per billion and et cetera. Unfortunately,
Can it do the polygons to, the volume of that polygon?
It can. However, I guess, I would argue that is not necessarily telling the whole story. There's a lot of places dioxane can end up besides in the groundwater. Larry Lemke from Central Michigan, him and one of his graduate students did write a paper doing some accounting of that dioxane. I don't have it on hand, and I don't have the results stored inside my brain for immediate recall. But they did indicate that there is some missing math from their accounting. I would say we do have an interest in doing some of that accounting, but getting through the activation energy to make that a reality is a pretty tough hill to climb. So that said, I think we're kind of right now we're dependent on what the academic folks came up with for good constraints on that at this moment.
Yeah, I
So
was hoping Rockworks had some kind of built-in function where you could, push a button and have it done for you.
yeah, like I said, it'll tell us, it'll give us the volume of, dioxane from 7.2 to 100, and you could
Right.
do some back of the envelope calculations on that. But like I said, I don't personally think that tells the whole story. So
Yeah. I remember seeing a 20,000 pound figure that leaked out of the negotiations for the fourth consent judgment. Maybe that was Larry's calculation, but I didn't see any supporting documents for that. So if you happen to have that, that would be a good thing to pass along. Anyway, anybody else? The other thing I just wanted to reiterate was, and it relates to this too, the connections plans that was mentioned in pointing these four areas that where water connections are contingency are being made. Only a couple of those have detections. So Elizabeth here and along Wagner Road, they had an old detection here. But there's 3 dozen up here currently homeowner wells that have dioxin in their well water right now and no access to city water. Now it's going to be very expensive to run city water up to this. And they're certainly not at the state's cutoff to have to do that. But some are getting close. And like I said, in Minnesota, some of these people would be getting water, right? Would be getting bottled water, just like what happened at the one 9 part per billion temporary detection in Ann Arbor Township, just north of Skyline School here. But so anyway, this is a concern that, and I think you said that EGLE might be expanding the study area of Rockworks to include this. And if I'd been involved early on, I would have said you should at least go up to the river because we know there's sampling being done up there. And especially now that we're sampling in more than a mile away from where the edge of the plume is thought to be, that and there might be even some sampling to the south. We've had historical hits south of Liberty, um, and maybe those were reading errors back in the early days. But it might have been there. And there's, of course, an offshoot that's going to the south, because that's where the surface, if you follow where the surface water channels are, and this offshoot here to the north follows this tributary, and there's probably an ancestral stream bed that's when the glaciers melted, it filled in, and somehow this connected to this surface tributary that doesn't even show in some of the EGLE's maps. But there's water in this surface tributary all the time. So 150 feet below that, there's an aquifer that's contaminated. And that might connect to this surface indication here. So really need to get a whole picture of where the problem is. And as I said before, this, to me, the data is evidence. And this is an ongoing crime scene where we don't have data shared that we should have. There's evidence to be gotten and to find out what the problem is so we can have the proper solution to fix it. And I think that's the end of mine. Any comments on my last part here?
I had a question, Roger. How many homeowners are using some kind of a filter system where they have 1,4-dioxane?
Jenny might be able to answer that.
We don't know, but if they take my survey, I'll have a much better idea.
Yeah, that'd be good if you
You have a survey?
Well,
It went out with a letter of notice that they're being sampled this year. So everyone who's being sampled this year got requested to take a QR code with a survey that asks that very question.
So some people don't answer the survey?
When I checked at the end of last week, we sent out like 140 notices and I got 3 so far.
You know, I think we need to send out a lottery ticket with it.
So you can find funding for that.
Roger, I have one other question. What do you think the level of dioxin would cause the townships to pressure the city to provide water to certain parts of the townships?
Well, first of all, does the city have any capacity to do that? Because when they supply water, they also have to supply sewer.
Right.
Otherwise, you get
Troubles.
Imbalance of water in the system, and it can cause flooding and blah blah blah.
We had to pay for our own sewer. They just did the water.
Yeah.
Well, when you hooked up, you're right. Gelman paid for the tap to go in front of the house for the water line. But the expansion costs for the sewers, most of the homeowners had to pay for that. And sometimes it was several $1,000s.
Oh, at least, yeah.
Yeah, so that's an issue. And not to mention cutting down all the trees to run the water lines and stuff that people aren't going to be happy about.
Well, what level would you think people would get upset and pressure to have water brought out?
Well, I think they'll move
7.2?
away before they know they can put enough pressure on to do that. And that's an issue. That's an issue for homeowners that might have been ready to, downsize or whatever, and now they've got contaminated water and they have to disclose that. What's that going to do to the price of their home when they sell it?
Well, I think those homes on Elizabeth, they said they're like almost there to where
Well,
Eagle's not going to wait till 7.2.
They've been up to 4 parts per billion. One house was up to 4 parts per billion in the past. Now it's around 2 or 3.
So I want to point out that the proposed development at the Knights of Columbus property wanted to tap into city water, but they were going to have their own sewage treatment plant. So they didn't need both city utilities. And that's probably what's going to happen in a fair portion of cases out in the townships, because I think the city has a greater capacity to supply water than to take on additional wastewater treatment. So that's going to be a complicating factor as we move forward as well.
Yeah, and having worked with local governments on water and sewer issues, that can be a problem in Michigan where you move water from one area to another. You're going to change the water table. And you're going to have some things happen that maybe will affect people blocks away. So in most cases, putting with where we are here, if you're putting more water in, you better take the water away in the waste. Otherwise, you're going to be adding to the water table. What do you have to say about that, Chris? I know you're not a hydrogeologist as much as.
I mean, my understanding, I can agree with you that, there will be changes to the water budget in an area. What those are, how EGLE would react to that, that's definitely outside of my wheelhouse. So.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that Eleanor discusses the costs that her family incurred with the hookups, because like they bought the house and also they had the additional cost because she and her husband had to do upgrades when they bought their house. They knew that they had to upgrade the septic system and their well. So they put out money for that. And just a couple of years later, they were told, can't use it anymore. And they had to pay for the sanitary sewer hookup. So thousands and thousands of dollars. I believe that the article says something like each phase costs like 6,000 to 8,000 in today's dollars, something like that.
Yeah, and then I remember hearing about a home in Evergreen area where they hooked up to city water, and their internal plumbing couldn't handle the pressure. And they had a
Mhm.
$25,000 replumbing
Yeah, yeah.
for the house on top of it.
A lot of hot water heaters can't handle high pressure.
Something, yeah, something in the plumbing. It was, older, the well pressure was a lot lower than what the water pressure is from the city. Yeah, so there are all kinds of issues like that. We have love-hate relationship with water. We need water, but we get too much water or bad water or what to do with extra water. We're walking bags of mostly water, each of us. We're about two-thirds water. And our brain is what, 80% water or something like that. So, we have to pay attention. And we have to, as I say, for two-thirds water, act accordingly. Anyway, I think that's the end of my
All right.
date.
Back to the agenda then. Does anyone have a non-agenda item that they'd like to raise at this point in the meeting?
I'd like to hear from people who I don't recognize on the screen. Beth, can you kind of go through and see who might be new and we want to learn a little bit more about them?
I
I
know
want
my
to,
former
first of all,
neighbor.
I want to thank Gretchen for sticking around through the whole thing. This is her first meeting and she's probably, overwhelmed with some of the information, but it's not always this bad. Go ahead, Beth.
Oh, Lynn Nibel. Hi. She's my former neighbor over in the Sister Lakes. And
Oh, really?
she was the one that reached out about the comprehensive land use plan, wondering why there was not a word of dioxane in it. So is that okay if I tell everyone, Lynn?
Yeah, yes, thank you. Yes. So I'm with the Sister Lakes Association. We still think of and talk about and depend on Beth all these years later, I know. But so I just said when I read the land use plan, noticed that there was no mention, and so she brought it before you, and I really appreciate your response, your very quick response, and also in James' presentation to the Planning Commission, which I shared with our Sister Lakes Association board. We appreciate the mention of the properties on the west side that could be impacted by development and the city's development agenda. The Ma property, for example, which as of a few days ago has a for sale sign and a phone number on it. It says simply 4 acres in the phone number. So we need to think about that again. So I found it very helpful that you referenced that property in your comments to the Planning Commission.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Lynn, do you want to take over as secretary when Beth is ready to finally retire?
I couldn't live up to her standard. I'm sorry, Jack.
Well,
we have AI assistants now that can help.
I was going to mention that it's traditional that the Sister Lake neighborhood provide us with secretarial services.
That's right.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'll be signing off.
Well,
has a
it's
full
great to see you.
yeah.
Your agenda is very remarkable. I mean, as a committee, you're really to be applauded for the detail and the number of issues that you place on it.
It takes a village.
Mm.
Who else on here, Beth?
I don't recognize if I don't know who Grant is or Amelia, but I heard we're going to have some interns with us today. It's from a couple different groups, and
Yeah, hi. I'm an intern in New Canaan, Connecticut, researching this issue as part of my senior internship. And what me and Amelia, she's my fellow intern, what we're looking at, or the reason why we joined rather, was just to kind of experience what this was like what like kind of a professional, I don't know if this is a word, like addressment of an issue like this is, and how it works, and just kind of experienced professionals in their field kind of doing their thing when it comes to pollution issues and things like this. So that's why we're here, and it was very very comprehensive, and as was said before, it was very very impressive, and just yeah, that's pretty much it.
So Grant, say again who you're with? Your student?
Heather Lawver, she's doing some papers on dioxane in Michigan and stuff like that, and um, I'm with her as part of my senior internship. So me
You're
and
in
Amelia both.
senior internship in what program? What school are you in and all that?
New Canaan, Connecticut.
Okay, so you have potential problems there that are similar.
Um, I don't think so. I think mostly we're looking at issues in Michigan. But they're, I mean, yeah, that yeah.
'Cause I think Connecticut is one of those states that has tighter standards than Michigan.
hmm Yeah, it does. But I mean, like I didn't know anything. Like I started this internship about 2 weeks ago, and I didn't know anything about this issue beforehand. And it's been really kind of eye-opening and interesting to learn about pollutants like 1,4-dioxane and such. And yeah, that's all.
Okay, well, we need to, of course, tell you that we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a graduate student at the University of Michigan back in 1984 that happened to sample the surface water next to the Gelman property on U of M Saginaw Forest research site and
Wow.
found dioxin and had to stick with it and convince the local and state authorities that this was a real problem for a year and a half before the problem became known. And if that research site had not been there, it had not been given to the University of Michigan by a lumberman back in lumber baron back in 1911 or something like that, uh, that student would not have been there to detect a dioxin, and we could have still had a much bigger problem today if dioxin had been used for another 40 years.
That's really incredible to hear, and
So
I mean, inspiring for me as a prospective college student to see that I can kind of make a difference like that.
yeah, and it was caused by a U of M graduate student. It was detected by a U of M graduate student or alumni, and now there's a whole lot of U of M people still involved in this over the years, like Rita and Larry Lemke and that and myself. Um, but it takes everybody to get all of this together and stay on top of it and keep it moving in the right way.
I've really seen that throughout this whole meeting. I mean, like you said, it takes a village, really. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
Now
so much, Mr.
Amelia
Rayle.
has her camera off. We can't even see what she looks like.
Oh,
They probably on purpose. They don't want to.
yeah, I'm a little
They don't want
disheveled
to
right
have to
now.
perform like we all do in
Well,
front
I
of.
want to make sure it's not a bot.
Oh, well,
Let me just add, though, for the students, Dan Bicknell, as a graduate student, really deserves tremendous credit because lots of students go through that woods and lots of students go and mess around in the pond for various reasons. But Dan had a curiosity and an inconsistency that he noted that he had been taught that the lake was spring fed, and he found a little stream trickling into it, and he said, "What's that?" And he followed it up to the property line of Gelman Sciences. And so he took a water sample in his water bottle or something like that, you know. And honestly, and the first reaction of the state was not supportive at all. I believe there was a direct quote from the DNR, Department of Natural Resources. I wouldn't give a toot for Bicknell's data. So a lot can be said for being, forthright and being that force. The student really did a lot as a student.
Yeah,
Did
and
a lot.
he got the word out, and then
Yeah.
the local health department and the
Yes.
state came in and
The county.
they did a whole lot of sampling
The
in a
county
short
did
period
it.
of time.
Yeah.
And I got a copy of all that data that Gelman actually compiled and along with some of their own samples. But still about 80% of those early samples are not in the current database. They show up on my Google Earth because I put them there. These are all the places that dioxin has been detected over the years. And some of these little orange diamonds are the early samples that were done. And of course, you'll notice that some of them are outside the Gelman area because they're here around Meddy Drive. Well, you know what else was around Meddy Drive? Is where the person that was doing sampling for Gelman had a laboratory.
Mm.
Now, the thought was that it was this former, there was a rest area here off of 94 at that time. And Gelman was saying, well, maybe it's the truckers are letting their radiator fluid out in the rest area. Or maybe, something else. I don't know that. I mean, at that time, the rest area would have had a well. Chris, do you know anything if there's ever a well, a sample of the well at the rest area back in the early days?
No,
Because that'd
sir.
be interesting to know. Now, the rest area is long gone. I don't know if it's because they still have to have a well there if they're going to have a rest area. But that'd be kind of an interesting loose end to follow up on sometime. But
So
yeah,
if you and Amelia have any questions, you can reach out to us, and obviously we'll give you more information than you thought you needed. And
yeah,
and
yeah,
we're always here and always willing to help anyone who is interested in dioxin.
yeah, because what we learn here can help all the thousands, tens of thousands of other, not just dioxin sites, but PFAS in groundwater sites where you have forever chemicals. What we learn from this site can perhaps be applied to all these other sites. So do pay attention and do get involved of whatever local thing you can and keep us up to date if anything we can help with. And definitely want to talk to you guys sometime. We could do a separate Zoom if you want to talk some more, and I can give you some. I probably have the most complete amalgamation of all the documents and things that have been able to glean from the various partners over the years, and uh, there's a lot of student projects in this, and dissertations and master's projects and things like that would really help nail down some of the understanding of the site. So I appreciate you guys coming.
Of course. Thank you for all your kind words. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
I think me and Amelia are gonna get going now. But thank you so much. And we'll see about further contact and maybe having like a individual Zoom meeting and all that. So thank you and have a nice day.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
And with that, I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a reminder that our next meeting will be July 1st at 6 p.m. I look forward to seeing everyone.
Thanks, everybody. And this was a really good meeting. I think there's a lot of content that we covered and got done in a lot of time, not quite as fast as we've done some recent months. But so the July meeting, we'll try to keep that down to an hour and a half, and have more people still attend. So thanks. And good to see all the new people on the screen and all the regulars, and thanks again.
Thanks, EGLE and everybody.
Yep. Thanks, Roger. Good job.
Thank you.
Bye. Everybody have a
next
good
time.
day.
Thank you.
Hey, Bob, you need to, oops, I was going to say, show your camera up a little bit. You still there, Diane? Perhaps not. All right, I'm going to shut it down.
Hi, sorry, I had stepped out for a little. I was interested in hearing the all of the interns being introduced and